What if the answer to a past you never knew you'd lost, the key to a wound you never knew you carried, was shivering on a cold bench at a desolate bus station? For one struggling single father, a simple act of kindness was about to become a bridge to a life he couldn't imagine. He thought he was just offering a stranger a warm room for the night. He had no idea he was about to uncover the truth of who he was and where he truly came from. The wind on that Tuesday night in October was a bitter, relentless thing. It clawed its way through the thin fabric of James's worn jacket and mocked the very idea of comfort. Every night felt like a quiet negotiation with heartbreak, but this one felt particularly cruel. Since losing his wife, Sarah, 3 years ago, it was just him and his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, navigating a world that felt perpetually uphill. He was a good man, but that goodness was a currency the world refused to accept. He worked double shifts in a steamy, clattering restaurant kitchen, the industrial heat a stark contrast to the cold dread that settled in his chest when he looked at his stack of bills. His life was an equation of survival, measured in scraped-together rent payments and the simple, radiant joy on Lily's face, a joy he fought to protect. Their small apartment, filled with furniture that had seen better days, was a sanctuary built not of wealth, but of bedtime stories, crayon drawings on the refrigerator, and the lingering scent of Sarah's lavender soap, a small ritual that kept a part of her with them. He carried his grief like a shadow, a constant companion that had shaped him into a man of profound empathy. He had made a promise to Sarah in the quiet of a hospital room that he would always be a good man, a kind father. It was the central pillar of his existence. That night, the bus was late. As they waited under the flickering lights of the deserted station, a place that always smelled of damp concrete and regret, Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, her breath a small cloud in the frigid air. "Is that lady okay?" James followed her gaze. Huddled on a bench was a woman, young and very pregnant. Her coat was thin, her arms wrapped around her swollen belly, as if to shield her unborn child from the world's indifference. Her face was pale, etched with a fear and exhaustion so profound it stole the air from James's own lungs. People hurried by, ghosts in a hurry, collars turned up against the wind, each locked in their own world. No one stopped. No one seemed to see her at all. James felt a familiar hesitation. He was a man running on empty. His rent was overdue. The transmission in his old car was making a sound like grinding teeth. How could he possibly carry the weight of another? But then he looked at Lily's wide, innocent eyes, and in them he saw the reflection of his wife's compassion. Sarah would have stopped, and the promise he'd made to her echoed in his heart, louder than the howling wind. He walked them over. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you all right?" The woman looked up, her blue eyes clouded with tears. I'm fine," she stammered, though her trembling body betrayed her words. "My bus was canceled," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I don't have anywhere to go." Her name was Clara. She offered nothing else. Her past a locked door. He saw in her the same terror he had felt the night Sarah died, the feeling of being utterly alone against an uncaring world. The decision, when it came, felt both impossible and inevitable. "I have a spare room," he heard himself say. "It's not much, but it's warm. And it's safe." Clara stared at him, suspicion warring with a glimmer of desperate hope. "Why?" she choked out. "You don't even know me." James looked at Lily, who was now shyly offering Clara a half-eaten granola bar. He gave a sad, tired smile. "Because no one should be alone when they're scared," he said softly. "And because my daughter is watching." Bringing a stranger into their home felt like stepping off a cliff. The spare room was small, filled with boxes of Sarah's belongings, a room of memories he could never bring himself to disturb. The first few days were a study in quiet tension. Clara moved like a ghost through the apartment, her answers to his questions brief and evasive. A knot of anxiety tightened in James's gut. The what-ifs were a constant tormenting chorus. It was Lily who broke the silence. Unburdened by adult suspicion, she saw only someone who needed a friend. she would sit outside Clara's room, narrating the adventures of her stuffed animals. One afternoon, she slid a drawing under the door, a wobbly portrait of a smiling woman with a big round belly, holding hands with a little girl. A few minutes later, the door creaked open. Clara stood there, the drawing in her hand, a faint, watery smile on her lips. "She's very talented," she whispered. From that moment, the ice began to thaw. Clara started joining them for dinner. One evening, James came home from a grueling shift to the aroma of soup. "I hope you don't mind," Clara said, almost apologetically. "I wanted to do something to thank you." As they ate, a fragile sense of normalcy settled over them. For a fleeting moment, it felt like a family. They fell into a gentle routine. James learned small things about her. She was skilled at knitting. She knew the constellations, and she would hum soft lullabies to her unborn child. But her past remained a fortress. Any question about where she was from was met with a polite wall of silence. On her bedside table sat a small, antique silver locket she clutched often, but never opened. The fragile piece was soon threatened. The landlord delivered a stern warning about long-term guests, a reminder of how thin the walls of their sanctuary truly were. The small additions to the grocery bill added up. The eviction notice on the counter felt like a ticking time bomb. Doubt began to creep back in. Was he a good father or a reckless fool? One night, as he sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, Clara emerged from her room. "You're in trouble because of me, aren't you?" she asked softly. He didn't have the energy to lie. He just nodded. "I saw the notice," she said, her eyes glistening. "I should leave." "No," James said, the word coming out with more force than he intended. "We'll figure it out. We're in this together." He didn't understand why he said it, but he knew it was true. A few days later, a small faded photograph slipped from the pocket of Clara's coat. James picked it up. It showed a grand, sprawling estate, a majestic stone manor that looked like it belonged in another century. A strange, unsettling feeling washed over him, a flicker of something that felt like a memory, but wasn't. The rent was due in 3 days, and then, one Thursday morning, he woke up to a silence that was too deep. He pushed open Clara's door. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. She was gone. On the bedside table lay the silver locket. He sank onto the bed, his heart a cold, heavy stone. He had been a fool. He had opened his home and his heart, and in return, he was left holding only the cold silver of a promise broken. A month passed. The chill of October gave way to the deeper cold of November. Life returned to its familiar rhythm of struggle, only now amplified. The eviction was no longer a threat, but a reality. They had 2 weeks. Despair was a constant guest. The silver locket sat on his dresser, a small, gleaming accusation. One rainy Saturday, there was a sharp knock on the door. He opened it to find a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit, an image so out of place in the shabby hallway that James blinked. "Are you Mr. James Miller?" the man asked, his voice calm and professional. "Yes," James replied. "My name is Arthur Covington," the man said, handing him a card from a prestigious law firm. "I am the legal representative for the estate of the late Eleanor Vance. May I come in?" Confused, James stepped aside. The name meant nothing to him. "I'm sorry," James said. "I think you have the wrong person." Mr. Covington's gaze was steady. "I believe I have the right person. My client, Mrs. Vance, passed away just over a month ago. For the last year, she was searching for 2 families. One of them was yours." He paused, his eyes landing on the dresser. "But before we proceed, may I ask, have you recently come into possession of an antique silver locket?" James's blood ran cold. He walked slowly to the dresser and held out the locket. Mr. Covington nodded. "This belonged to Eleanor's granddaughter, Clara Vance." The name hit James like a physical blow. The lawyer began to explain, and with every word, the foundation of James's world crumbled and reformed. Clara, he learned, was indeed the granddaughter of the incredibly wealthy Eleanor Vance. She was running from a controlling family, but the connection was deeper. Mr. Covington produced an old, black and white photograph. It was the same grand estate. "This is the Vance family estate," the lawyer explained. "Decades ago, your father, Thomas Miller, was the head groundskeeper there. He was a trusted friend of the family." James barely remembered his father. He'd always been told he was a simple laborer. "Your father," Mr. Covington continued, "was framed for theft by another employee. He was dismissed in disgrace, forced to leave with his wife and young son. He was too proud to fight and carried that shame for the rest of his life." It was a shame James had inherited without ever knowing its name. "Shortly before she passed," the lawyer said, "Eleanor Vance uncovered the truth. The other employee made a deathbed confession. Consumed with guilt, Eleanor spent her last year trying to find your family to right a terrible wrong. Clara running away and finding you. It's a coincidence of such magnitude one is tempted to call it fate. You took her in and showed her a kindness she had never known. You proved your father's integrity was a legacy he passed on to you." The lawyer slid a thick folder across the table. Eleanor's will was amended. A significant portion of her estate was set aside to rectify the injustice. "Mr. Miller, you are the sole heir to a trust fund that will ensure you and your daughter are secure for life." She also bequeathed you the deed to the head groundskeeper's cottage on the estate, the very home your father was forced to abandon. But James had only one question. "Clara," he managed, "is she all right?" "She is," Mr. Covington assured him. "The morning she left, she went into labor. We found her through hospital records. She has a healthy baby boy. She asked me to find you. She's waiting." The following weekend, he and Lily drove up to the Vance estate. They were shown to a sunlit room where Clara was sitting, cradling her newborn son. Her eyes filled with tears. "James," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." She handed him a letter from her grandmother, thanking him for showing her granddaughter that goodness still existed in the world. Looking at Clara, her tiny son, and his own daughter, who was already peeking at the baby with wonder, James felt a sense of completion. This wasn't about money or a house. It was about a wound, generations deep, finally being closed. They were 4 people from broken pasts, brought together by a desperate night. They were no longer strangers. They were a family. A single act of kindness, offered with no expectation of reward, can ripple through time. For James, it was a bridge connecting a forgotten past to a future filled with hope. Perhaps the most beautiful families begin not with shared blood, but with an open heart and an empty chair on a cold night. Has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. And for more stories that prove the power of compassion, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are not alone.